All right. Hello again, adventures, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is Daily Vlog 2025, number 248. And today, uh, I am tired yet again. I got to thinking recently. I'm brushing up on my draw steel in preparation for the campaign this December, and I found a character builder thingy mabob thing on GitHub through the subreddit. And so as I was making my character, one of the things that came up a couple different times is there's a couple different ways that you can get languages in the game. And I know we've talked. I need a drink. We've kind of talked about languages before, in relation to. Sorry, I got stuff on my shoulders that's driving me nuts. All right, so we've talked about languages before as it relates to some classes, and basically the thing that I tend to say more often than not is your mileage may vary, because the usefulness of knowing any particular language in any tabletop RPG is almost always going to rely on how much the GM uses languages. I have run games where languages really just aren't a thing. And I've played in games where languages just really aren't a thing. It's, Star Trek rules, everybody speaks English. And then there's been other games where I'm fairly regularly asking my players, okay, what languages do you guys speak? Okay, well, you don't know what's going on here. They're speaking a language you don't know. But it got me thinking to the idea of language just as a mechanic in general in tabletop RPGs, and whether or not it's that useful, I guess you could call it. Let me explain. So, from a mechanical standpoint, I've said this many times before. The only time you should introduce a new system into your game is if you are unable to do something without adding that new system. Anything else, just use one of the existing systems. Good example. Let's say you're creating a tabletop RPG and you have a combat system already, but you decide that for the rapier, because you're familiar with fencing and stuff like that, you're specifically going to make fencing rules, and so you create this basically entirely different system for someone using a rapier because it better mimics how you would use it if you were fencing. And while technically, yes, you can do that, if you already have a combat system that works for literally everything else, it's kind of a waste of your time to create an entirely different combat system just for one weapon. Especially since, depending on what you're doing with it, you might be able to fold that into the current combat system. Maybe they don't need, a particular thing that allows them to target different body parts and all that stuff that no one else can do. Maybe it would just be easier to give them special attacks, or have it built into the weapon that the weapon itself can do different things, but you don't have to design a completely new system to do it. So when we talk about language from a mechanical standpoint, well, what does a quote-unquote language system do for a tabletop RPG? Well, effectively, it's a way to gatekeep certain knowledge from the players. Like, that's really, from a purely mechanical standpoint, that is the only real benefit uh, to having a language system is the ability for information to go out and only some of the people in the room to know what's going on. And it doesn't exclusively have to be used against players. It could just as easily be the players all speaking a language they know this other person doesn't know, so that they can have a conversation without that person hearing them. But that's effectively what a quote unquote language system does. And if that is the only thing that your language system is designed to do, is it worth introducing all these different languages and coming up with backstories for where they came up with and where they're spoken and all that? Is it really worth that much to be able to gatekeep a little bit of information some of the time? And in my humble opinion, I don't think it is. But when we look at language as human beings use it, language is not like, if you actually study language and things like that, it's not exclusively to, like, technically the purpose of language is to convey ideas. But when you start looking into different languages, you start to actually get a look into how the cultures that speak those languages work. Like, the language is going to reflect the culture. And even when you have two very, very different cultures that actually speak the same language, like, good example, Spanish in Spain versus Mexican Spanish. Technically, they both speak Spanish. Technically, I believe there isn't that much difficulty between someone from Spain speaking to someone from Mexico, both in Spanish. Like, they can both roughly understand each other, but they are different dialects. There are different aspects to them. And when you really start studying, like, Mexican Spanish, you invariably have to start learning a little bit about their culture, because there are colloquialisms and other things like that that are used in Mexican Spanish that have no existence in Spanish or Spanish from Spain. The same is true about, like, French Canadian French versus Parisian French. Or even, like, Southern English, Southern U.S. English versus Midwestern or Northern U.S. English. Like, the different dialects do have different things, and they, if you actually take the time to learn the languages, it does actually help you get a bit of an understanding for the culture itself. And that is an aspect that I don't think I've ever seen a TTRPG attempt to deal with. Because first of all, it's kind of a really subjective thing, and second of all, there's so many other systems that they have to design. Why would you waste time coming up with, like, a culture system specifically based on languages and things like that? But again, right now, I think the way that the vast majority of TTRPGs use language is super underutilized, and it's not really all that great. It's so useless that, again, I know a lot of dungeon masters that completely leave language out of their games, and it doesn't affect the game in any way, shape, or form. If you can completely remove an aspect from the TTRPG and it doesn't change how the game plays in any noticeable way, then that system is poorly designed. And either you need to get rid of the system, or you have to find a way to integrate it into other aspects of the system so that it actually does have an impact on the gameplay, preferably a positive impact on the gameplay. So if we wanted to design a language system that actually had an impact, like, we could piggyback it on the role-playing system and just put some really simple things, like, for every language a simple thing could be anyone that speaks that language, you get some kind of a bonus when negotiating with them. But to take it a step further, again, if we look at languages as an aspect of culture, there are certain things that certain cultures value more than others. Fun fact for anyone that doesn't know, backgammon. My understanding, this comes secondhand from my late father, who technically never lived in Turkey, but somehow while he was deployed in Germany, I think he learned how to speak perfect Turkish, and picked up the most popular game in Turkey, which is backgammon. And whereas if you go like to like Russia, chess is just something that everybody learns how to play. It's a national pastime. Whereas like in the U.S., sports tend to be the national pastime. Right now, it's American football for the most tends to be the big one that most people know about. If we go back even just like 30 years ish, it was baseball. It was baseball for a really, really long time. And yeah, when you see like, I mean, if we compare baseball to football, football is a significantly more simple game as far as watching and technically playing it too. Every single person on the team has a very particular job that they do, and that's all they have to do. With the rare exception of like the quarterback, who has to technically they only have one job, but that job is lead the team, which is a very complex job. Whereas when you look at baseball, not only do you have your position you have to play on the field, you also have to be able to bat, unless you're a pitcher, and you also have to understand basically the people around you. You have to understand their job on the field as well, because you might have to take over that position depending on where the ball goes, and you constantly have to be in communication with everyone. And when you look at how language has kind of evolved over the years, we go back to when baseball was really popular, and the idea of conversation and debate and things like that was much more kind of intellectual, and you tried to come up with logical reasons. Nowadays, if we look at how modern discourse works, it's basically who can yell at the other person the loudest and has the gotcha moment for them, which is very football-esque of I will hit you with enough force, and whoever has more force gets to win this time. There's still some strategy to it. I'm not saying that there's no strategy in football at all. There's a lot of strategy to it. It's just very rare that like your linebacker is going to be involved in your strategy meeting. They're told you do this until you hear the whistle blow. So bringing that back to tabletop RPGs, I think part of creating these languages, there should also be you have to create a culture behind the language, and there should be some kind of benefit built into learning that language that gives you maybe a bonus to something. Like I think that would probably be the simplest thing that you could do. Would just be like, if you know this language, then you get a bonus to this particular skill because that skill is valued in this culture. If you want to get a little bit more complex, you could give like certain abilities that if you know this language, because this is something that's really, really common in this particular culture, you can actually approach this situation differently. Very similar to in Draw Steel, the perk system. The perk system doesn't allow you to like it doesn't give you bonuses to things, but it does allow you to use skills in different ways or to approach situations in a slightly different way. I think you theoretically could do something like that with a language system and just tie it back to, well, these are things that the culture um, the culture values, and by actively learning the language well enough that you can be fluent in it, and you can just hear someone speaking it and automatically understand what they say, which is not an easy thing to do. Reading a language is significantly easier than speaking it and listening to it. Then you get this additional bonus, or you can try these checks doing this particular thing, or I think that would make for a significantly more interesting language system, and it would encourage players at least to interact with the language system. It would still be something that the GM would have to choose to implement, but if the players are constantly going, oh, because I understand Elvish, I can do this, or I'm going to use my Elvish language proficiency to do this in this situation, it would keep it in the forefront of all of the players, and the GM would likely use languages more simply because they're there constantly. So, yeah, like I said, I got to thinking about languages and how kind of useless they are in modern TTRPGs, and I think there is potential there that it is not being expressed. Interested to hear from you guys, though. First of all, as far as languages in campaigns you've either run or played in, have they played a big part, or have you not noticed and not cared what language your character speaks? And then on the other side, what do you think about a more complex language system that actually does interact with the game? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, it's all from me, Lay. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.